the excitement is real. I think it's happening from the ground up. North Carolina was part of an historic election with Barack Obama in 2008. I think we could have won his re-election in 2012, but the campaign made some targeting decisions. But what she's going to do is to appeal to working people, understanding that Donald Trump's vision has been a dark one. Hers is one where she wants to help working families while he's had a history of ripping them off. I believe that that message will resonate in North Carolina. We're the third fastest growing state. She gets credit for the fact that our economy is the best in the world right now. Low unemployment, high stock market, jobs increasing, inflation cooling. But she understands that everyday people still are hurting because of high cost. It's hurting when they go to the grocery store, when they try to find child care. That's why she laid out her economic plan. And you know she thinks she can win North Carolina because she came and did it there on that Friday. And in fact, when she came down the stairs of the jet, Air Force Two, she yelled at me, "How many times is this, Roy?" I said, 16, Madam Vice President. She has been to North Carolina 16 times as Vice President. So it's clear that this state matters to her. We're the third fastest growing state in the country. We have technology that's booming, life sciences. People who are moving there, I think, are more inclined to vote for Kamala Harris. So I'm excited about it. One other thing that because I know people want to ask questions, but we have the most important governor's race in the country and important statewide races that are generating their own excitement because of the right-wing extremism of the Republican candidates who have been nominated. And I think that there's going to be a top-down effect with Kamala Harris's campaign, but I think there's going to be a bottom-up effect with us trying to break the Republican supermajority in the state legislature and winning these statewide races. And I think all of that is going to come together for a strong Democratic showing in North Carolina this time.
I think my colleague Mario Parker has a question.
Thank you, Governor. Appreciate you coming in. You mentioned the third fastest state, the growth there. What are you seeing demographically, A, and then B, in terms of just, I think you may be alluding to black voters, more affluent voters as well, that she has to court. Does Mark Robinson on the ticket for the gubernatorial race complicate that at all, that outreach?
No, it doesn't, because Mark Robinson represents the extreme wing of the Republican Party. He does not respect women. In fact, he has said that men should lead and not women. He has said awful things that, and it's hard for me to even say because it's so awful, but that abortion happens because women aren't responsible enough to keep their skirts down. That is the kind of language that he uses, and in fact, it comes from his own voice because he posted it on his social media. He has denied the Holocaust. He has called LGBTQ plus people filth. He has advocated violence. So I don't think he's going to attract people who want to move our state forward, who value education, health care. He said the other day we're going to turn away all federal education funds. So his election would be a disaster for North Carolina, for our job growth, for the fact that we've become a clean energy epicenter, the fact that we've just expanded Medicaid. We've gotten a lot of bipartisan things done in our state. He's not the kind of guy who will do that. But I think it will help Vice President Harris's race because I think it will help draw people out. She will be drawing people out to vote for her for this historic race, but he will also be drawing people out that I think will end up voting for her.
One question I have just about going back to Harris's policy speech in North Carolina on Friday. There has been a lot of discussion in the last few days with people I've talked to about how far she needs to go on giving details on what she would actually do if she's reelected. Do you feel like that economic speech went far enough, or does she need to sort of put out more detailed policy to appeal to people from the working class?
I think she will definitely put out more detail as she goes along. Look, she's been a member of the United States Senate. Tim Walz has been a member of the U.S. House. They both know how to get things done in Congress. We saw the vice president participate in generational investments in legislation that was passed historically through a broken Congress by the Biden-Harris administration. So they understand that to actually get things done and not just talk about it, there has to be details. There has to be a lot of give and take. What she's laying out are broad strokes of ideas of how we can shift the dynamic to make sure that we're paying attention to the working class. Because these Trump tax breaks for the wealthiest among us has taken money out of the system for everyday working people. And she's trying to right the ship here with her proposals. And I think they were good proposals. I think we'll see more details as we go along.
Are there certain areas where you think she needs to give more details for voters in your state, like inflation or energy or Gaza or foreign policy?
Well, I think that most people want to hear what her vision is, that she is for working families, that she is for job growth, that she believes that these people that we just expanded Medicaid for should have their medical debt erased because medical debt is not a choice. And in North Carolina, we work with the vice president to come up with a plan that's going to help us remove $4 billion in medical debt for about 2 million North Carolinians. I think that's the kind of thing they want to hear. I don't know if they want to hear details of legislation. They want to know, how is it going to affect me and my life? That child care tax credit, they know about that because they've gotten it before, and then they got it snatched away. And I think that will matter in this election.
Particularly with AP, you mentioned all of the reasons why North Carolina is winnable for the Democratic ticket this fall. But the way you laid it out, how extreme it is, the extreme positions of your would-be successor on the Republican side. I mean, why isn't it a blowout? What is happening in North Carolina, that it is as divided as it is, that the race is as close as it is, as the polls show, and what more should the Harris campaign be doing to drive those numbers up?
Yeah, unfortunately, partisan politics is still strong. North Carolina is a very purple state, so you can expect a certain amount of votes for each party. I think what she needs to do, and I think she will do this because she believes it, is that she wants to get things accomplished, and she's willing to work with Republicans to get things done. I've been able to do that in North Carolina. I think that has gotten me Republican support because even though they may not agree with me on a lot of issues, they think that I'm doing what I believe is right and that I'm trying to find ways forward. Kamala Harris is the same kind of leader. I served with her as a state attorney general during the foreclosure crisis. She being Attorney General of California, me in North Carolina, and we worked together, and so I got to know her a little bit at that time. I know she's a fighter. I know that she wants to try and get things done, and to negotiate the largest settlement, the largest consumer financial settlement in U.S. history required a lot of give and take and push, and she's able to do that. And I think people want to hear from leaders who want to accomplish things that matter to them and aren't just toeing the party line and aren't just emphasizing partisan politics. And I think that can help her. Obviously, we need to turn people out who want to protect women's reproductive health because Donald Trump wants to take it away. And regardless of what he says now, he's very proud of what he did in eliminating Roe v. Wade. And you bet that if, for some reason, I hope it doesn't happen, but that Republicans control the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House, and Donald Trump gets a nationwide abortion ban, he will sign it in a New York minute. He will do it. And we need to be aware of that. We also need to know that Kamala Harris, if we can take control of both the U.S. Senate and the House, will enshrine women's reproductive freedom into federal law, which is important.
I think Rick has a question.
Thank you, Governor. Rick Klein from ABC News. You mentioned that the 2008 feeling you say you have. I'm guessing you didn't have it 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I'm curious, in your mind, what happened in the last month or so? Is it just a question of being out with a president that a lot of people thought was too old after a bad debate? Is it something about Harris? What's your sense of why you can have a feeling like that when I don't think you would have had it a month ago?
I think it's a combination of things. I think Democrats were not united because of disagreements on whether President Biden should go forward. And I must take a minute to say how grateful I am to this patriot who always puts America first. I've known President Biden for a while. I also served with Beau Biden, his son, as Attorney General. I remember visiting with Beau when the president was then vice president and talking with him and knowing his character. And I think two things were going on with him. One was doing the right thing, and the other was fighting through adversity. And most of the time, those two character traits coincide. This time, I think he recognized that doing the right thing was not trying to fight through this adversity. And I'm grateful for his decision to do that because it brought everybody together. And yes, Kamala Harris is a big part of that because I think during this last 3.5 years, we've seen her getting ready to do this and ready to meet this moment. When she came to North Carolina after the Dobbs decision and spoke at a rally there, you could tell that she had found her passion. She was the right person to be talking about this issue that we know is going to galvanize people across the country. And I think everybody was excited about the fact that we now had a unified way forward here. And it was really nothing against President Biden. You heard that crowd last night. Everybody loves President Biden. But it was time to do this. It's time to make history, particularly when we have Donald Trump as the alternative.
Stephanie, go ahead.
Yep. Governor, you're partly in office because you've been very good at speaking across the aisle, appealing to Republican-leaning voters. If you're sort of compare and contrast the way the campaign was addressing economic issues with President Biden and now with Kamala Harris on the top of the ticket, do you think she needs to get quicker to the sort of negatives, to the more realism about people not feeling the benefits of the recovery? I just was thinking about the speech last week. The first half sounded like the sort of Biden stump speech, it's all been fantastic on the economy, and then she pivoted to, I understand that people don't all feel it, but it felt like that was quite late in the speech.
And I disagree with you because I think that she was fairly early understanding that people were deeply concerned about the cost of living. I think it's important for her to take credit for the amazing turnaround in our economy because it's very real. But I think she pretty quickly, and this was the reason that she wanted to come and roll this out, was to acknowledge to people, yeah, I understand what you're feeling. I've talked to enough people to see that grocery prices are too high, that the cost of child care is almost overwhelming now that the child care stabilization grants have disappeared. And so she wanted to come and say, I hear you. I have these proposals to work to try to help you get through this period of time. of rising costs.
But do you think it is the economy, that message, that's central to winning over those people that had not been won over, those few people in the middle that you're trying to get?
I think it is one of the central messages for sure, because you see time and time again that people are concerned about the economy, and when people are talking about the economy, they're talking about their family, they're talking about their job, they're talking about making sure that they have enough money at the end of the month. And she is addressing those issues. I think, too, women's reproductive freedom will be a critical issue. And so I think a lot of these drivers here, and character, and vision of leadership, Trump continues to lie and make outrageous statements. And I think these people, there's a very relatively small group of people who are undecided in this race, but people who continue to look at these two candidates and really think about who they are as people and what kind of leaders we want across this country. Do we really want somebody who admires and cozies up to dictators across the world? That's not who we want to lead this country. And I think enough people will recognize that, but that means, too, we must continue to work to get the people who agree with us to think this is important enough to go and vote, because there are a lot of people who are frustrated at the political system, and I think you saw a lot of that, more of that before Vice President Harris became our Democratic nominee. A lot of people just thinking that did not matter, even though they agreed with us on these issues. So I think that we're at a point now where a lot of these people understand, yeah, this matters. Yeah, my vote could make a difference.
Carolyn?
Heading into the DNC was a decent amount of concern, still is, about the level of protests that we might see here. Can you speak to how big of an issue you think it is, the division within the Democratic Party over Israel, and what you're hearing from your constituents on this?
Well, first, it's wonderful we live in a country where people can protest. And I'm very grateful for that freedom of speech and people who are wanting to make their voices known, because this is a tragic situation in the Middle East right now, with hostages being held, with terrorist attacks, and with so many innocent people dying and families that are suffering. I have met with parents and loved ones of hostages who are being held by Hamas right now. I have met with families whose relatives live in Gaza, who have died, who are suffering. I think that both President Biden and Vice President Harris understand that we must achieve peace here. And I think that's why so much is happening to pressure a peace deal, to bring these hostages home and to cease the hostility. Yes, it will be a political issue, but it's more about the humanity of it all, and it's more about the safety and security of our world and trying to find a way forward in the Middle East. So I think when President Biden came to North Carolina a lot, and usually I would just jump in and ride with him during the day when he was there, and he would tell me, I'm spending 80% of my time on foreign policy. And he would talk a bit about this and how difficult it was and how frustrated that he was with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and how he wanted to find a way forward. He was frustrated with Hamas too, and Iran and everything else, but trying to achieve this deal is something that they are working on night and day. And I think most people know that. Most Democrats understand that. But I do understand the passion that's involved in this.
Riley?
Yeah, just to follow up,
Sure.
If a ceasefire isn't reached, what do you think the consequence on the election would be?
It's hard to know. I mean, this is something that has been with us for too long. I think they're going to continue to work to try to find an agreement and try to find a way forward. Iran still hasn't taken the action that people anticipate yet, and maybe that's for hope for finding a deal. But I'm getting off my turf a little bit, I think.
And Governor, you mentioned rapid growth to the life sciences and tech sectors of North Carolina. As you see workers come to the Research Triangle, how is that shifting voter priorities in your state?
I think with more college-educated voters, I think it is people who want to elect people who believe in education from cradle to career, who understand the importance of early childhood education, who understand that we need to support our public schools, not take taxpayer money out of it, give it to private school vouchers. People who realize the importance that North Carolina has the best community college system in the country. I think we have the best array of public and private universities in the country. We have more four-year HBCUs than any other state in the country. North Carolina A&T State graduates more black engineers than any institution in the country. We have a qualified, dedicated, diverse workforce, and it's a state where people want to come, and when they come, they don't want to leave. So we are excited for this progress, and that's why we need to prevent these extreme candidates from taking over. We got a school board, a superintendent of public instruction, head of public schools race that is also a very extreme candidate who homeschools her children, who took them to the January 6th that eventually led to the storming of the Capitol, who believes that our public schools are socialist indoctrination centers and that parents ought to take their children out of public schools and that public school teachers should have guns in the classroom. It goes on and on and on. And we must make sure that quality candidates like our Democratic candidate, Mo Green, who's been a businessman, who's been a school superintendent, who believes in our public schools. You can't run our public schools if you don't believe in our public schools. And that's what she wants to try to do. So going off topic here just a little bit, but there's so much going on in our state election-wise to keep us moving forward, because we do have a majority Republican General Assembly that sometimes wants to lead us in that direction. And I think the balance that we've been able to achieve has been attractive to businesses, been attractive to people, and why we continue to grow and continue to be successful.
Tim, go ahead.
Governor, I wanted to return to Nancy's original question about 2008 and your Obama vibes from 2008. In a specific kind of way, what's that going to look like demographically and geographically inside of North Carolina, and where's the trench battle going to be fought the most closely to flip the state?
I think the key is young people. I talk with so many of them who are passionate about issues, climate, fighting discrimination, gun violence, health care for people. Oftentimes, that passion doesn't translate to actually voting, whether it's because a young person is transient, do I register at college or at home, or whether they think that, hey, I care about these issues, but this political system is not going to solve them and my vote doesn't matter. I think we're seeing more and more interest by young people, which I saw in 2008, that can make the difference in this election. You know, I'm not a pollster, I'm not the political strategist here, but I sense that on the ground, and in the top line polling I see, that is making a difference. I also think that women are going to play a significant role here because personal freedoms are under attack. Women's health is under attack. And it's pretty clear who's on the side of women here. So that combination, I think, can be the winning ticket for Democrats in North Carolina this time.
Republicans had not been spending any money in North Carolina until about a week ago, when they've made a bunch of really big ad buys. Elon Musk's PAC is hiring canvassers in North Carolina, one of the two places that they're spending money. What does this suggest to you about Republican strategy in the state? And are you worried that Democrats are maybe not prepared for the onslaught of money and might that's
Oh, we are. We get it. We get it. I mean, they're panicking. They're panicking. Donald Trump has to win North Carolina. There's really no scenario where he's elected president without winning North Carolina. Kamala Harris can win North Carolina. She is the next president of the United States. They know that. So this is why they will be there this week. This is why in 2020, I think we had a member of the Trump family in North Carolina every other day. I expect the same thing this time, but I think the Harris campaign is meeting that moment. We had, I'm sure the numbers are greater, but I saw them last week, 12,000 volunteers, 10,000 of them had already done a first round of service in their volunteer. And I saw this figure that 90% of them were first-time volunteers. So things are happening on the ground for Democrats. And remember, in 2020, most Democrats were observing COVID protocol and weren't knocking on doors, weren't carrying people to the polls. This time it's happening. And I think you're going to see a great ground game. I think the Harris campaign has 20 field offices in North Carolina. I think it's supposed to go to 25. Hundreds of hired workers are there. There is a significant, the ad buys have continued in North Carolina. We are their offensive state. They're trying to win every other state that they won in 2020. This is the one state that they didn't win. This was their closest loss, 1.3%. This is a race that they want to win, North Carolina, because that unlocks the door. We're excited about it.
Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Governor. Earlier policy conversation. In the 4 weeks since the vice president has been at the top of the ticket, she's reversed some for long-held positions on Medicare for all, fracking, the Green New Deal, several other policies. Does that concern you at all, or do you get the sense that voters don't care about policy in this sort of environment? That is this really the vibes election? Is there are the personalities more important than the policy this time around?
Well, I think the policy and how it affects people is always important, but clearly the character of the candidate can be more important. I think it reflects her 3.5 years as vice president, being involved in getting major legislation through Congress, CHIPS and Science, Inflation Reduction Act, American Rescue Plan, bipartisan infrastructure, gun legislation, amazing accomplishments. She saw the give and the take, and I think that's just part of growing as an elected official and growing as a candidate and being a president for everybody. It doesn't mean she isn't going to continue to work to get us to carbon zero and to fight climate change and to celebrate the economic wins that occur, the money that goes in the pockets of everyday people's families, the American jobs that are created because of it. So I think both of them are going to continue to be important, and that doesn't really concern me.
Yasmin, did you have a question?
I did. Could you talk a little bit about some of the tangible changes you're seeing that feel like they're putting the state more in play? I know the Harris campaign has talked about a surge in volunteers in North Carolina, some voter signups, especially among young voters. I mean, could you just talk a little bit about what you were seeing a month ago or 5 or 6 weeks ago versus now in terms of where you've seen some dramatic changes in the state that have put it more in play?
Well, I think that President Biden also had North Carolina on the target list. So the reason we had 20 offices are because the Biden-Harris campaign had made those investments early, and that North Carolina was going to be a part of the campaign strategy. I think Vice President Harris is just, I like the fact that she hasn't come in and tried to change everything. She has come in and said, we're going to bring new people to this, but we're going to use this campaign structure, which looks to be very effective here. And I think the difference is the excitement, the volunteers, the fact that, shortly after President Biden said he wasn't going to run again, in North Carolina, the 163, I don't have the exact number, but the 163 delegates within hours met and voted unanimously to endorse Kamala Harris. And it's hard to get 163 committed Democrats to agree to anything. And they did that on their own. And this happened in other states. And so it was as much of a ground-up movement. I think almost that the people, certainly the Democratic Party members and delegates, brought along the leaders here to say, look, this is where we need to go. This is the person we need to do to say gets this nomination. So there's an excitement there that's really hard to describe, but I do feel like I felt in 2008 when people were so excited about it. People want to make history, and they will be making history here.
And can I just ask one quick follow-up, which is, where do you see, not necessarily weaknesses, but where do you see the work that Democrats need to do to shore up the stakes? It's obviously a very expensive, very difficult state to win. So where do you see some of the areas that Democrats really need to shore up and work on, whether it's policy or certain types of voters or outreach? Where are you seeing some of that?
So I think we can take advantage of the wonderful things that are happening in rural North Carolina. I think maybe there can be some people there. We know how red those counties are getting. The president said it last night. We've had more investments in red states than in blue states. We have seen Medicaid expanded in North Carolina. We have almost 530,000 people who now have health insurance. We got a Republican legislature to do that because we got their constituents to tell them so. We had tough on crime Republican sheriffs who had people in their jails who knew they knew they shouldn't be there. So they said, these people need health care and not handcuffs. We had Republican county commissioners who saw rural hospital doors beginning to close and that they needed a way to be compensated. We saw chambers of commerce where providers were treating indigent patients and they need to make up the cost, so they go to the private sector and increases the premiums. These people came together and we coordinated it to talk with their rural Republican legislators that we need to expand Medicaid. And so now people have that health insurance. Now we're working to forgive medical debt. I've talked to people in rural counties who thought they were forgotten, who are now getting new water systems in their towns. We had already started a plan to connect people to high-speed internet. We were putting tens of millions of state dollars in it. Now we're putting billions. And so we have the structure in place. We got some changes done with Treasury so we could use the plan we already had in place. And now I'm talking to small businesses who finally can connect with global markets and people who are making their mental health appointments on high-speed internet. We can get people the understanding that Kamala Harris had a lot to do with these things, then I think that can result in some help at the ballot box at the end of the day.
Sharon, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Governor, I wanted to ask you about your decision to take yourself out of the running for VP, and also if you could give us any, what lay behind that, and if you could give us any insight into the vetting process. Were you asked, for instance, about whether you thought you could deliver the state if you were on the ticket?
I knew Tim Walz was coming. I knew he was coming. I knew he was there. Now, it just, I removed myself very early. I did not go through vetting. I wasn't the right time for me or my state. And I am so excited about this ticket. I've known Tim Walz a while. We both served as chairs of the Democratic Governors Association. He is the right person for this job. Extraordinary leader, everyday person, straight shooter, funny guy, the kind of person that you want to hang out with, because I've hung out with him and liked it a lot. So I'm really happy with this ticket, and I'm all on board to get them elected.
I can follow on that.
Yeah.
Was part of your decision making that anytime you left the state, it would have left the lieutenant governor in charge, and it would have meant some...
That was part of it, yes. But we don't think we do. There's a legal dispute about that.
You think so?
It was more a distraction. He would have a magnified distraction. I had a trip to Japan where he called a news conference and said he was governor, and issued a proclamation commending Israel. I don't know why he didn't think about the fact that he was going to have a lot of questions about his anti-Semitic statements and denial of the Holocaust when he did that. But those are the kinds of things that potentially would get magnified.
Could I just ask, don't the Republicans already have a supermajority and they could override anything that you would put through? So would you being out of the state really make any difference?
Well, look, governor has a lot of power and authority with executive orders, with appointing judges, with doing all kinds of things. And we do not believe that the power transfers to the lieutenant governor.
I watched some of the events that you did
Yep.
yesterday with some other news outlets, and you did express a desire to serve potentially in the Harris administration if she's reelected.
All I said was
That was
all
how
options
I-
were on the table. So
That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, okay.
But specifically, like, do you want to serve? Would you serve as Attorney General if she was elected?
So I really don't know what I'm going to do. I have no idea. What I know I'm going to do, this is the first time in a couple of decades that I haven't been on the ballot. But I'm working as if I were, because everything I care about is on the ballot. I'm going to work hard in these elections. I'm going to work every day as governor till the end of the year. When that time ends, I will look at the landscape, and I like public service. Then I'll figure out what the next thing is for me, because I really do not know.
Yeah, just to follow up there, would you weigh a Senate bid? That's a different direction, but
All
is that on your
options
mind?
are on the table.
On the table.
I was going to jump in, Governor, since we've been around most of the table, I think, and come back to the issue of mobility. This is the first presidential election since the 2020 election with COVID. A lot of people, as you mentioned, have moved around the country, but particularly to North Carolina. Could you talk a little bit more about why you were saying earlier you think that those people may be more likely to vote Democrats? What are you seeing on the ground?
I hope they will. More college-educated people with good-paying jobs that we're creating in our state, moving to North Carolina. We're very excited about that. A lot of unaffiliated voters become our largest group right now. So we believe that they are places that we can go to be successful in getting their votes. So I think it can make a real difference.
So on election night, where in North Carolina will you be watching most closely? That may be different than in years past.
It's hard to know. I really am not the political strategist. We're going to see votes coming in at different times. This is one of the problem is, well, the good thing is we've got the most secure elections we've ever had. There's so many people working hard to make sure the vote reflects what the people have chosen. And this undermining of our democracy, this undermining of our elections by Trump and MAGA leaders is very frustrating and dangerous, because you can already see him laying the groundwork. If I don't win, then the election was a fraud. And we need to make sure that we do everything that we can to make sure these elections are secure. And one of the things that happens is that early vote comes in early, and more Democrats vote early. So it's a bigger lead. Those are the kinds of things that happen that you really can't tell on election night what's going to be happening. I'll just wait for the final tally. At that point, you can't do anything.
I just want to follow up on that, the registrations point and whatever, because, I mean, unlike a lot of states, you actually have had a big increase in voter registrations in the state since 2020, the last numbers I looked at, but nearly 400,000. But there had been, you know, as you say, that was unaffiliated, and there's this sort of more than 200,000 fall in the registered Democrat voters. So I just wondered how you're looking at that. Are you concerned about that? I mean, a lot of places, it's bigger than the margin of victory that Biden had, so people are focused on it.
I'm a Democrat. I'm grateful for the work that the Democratic Party does. But an unaffiliated voter is a free agent. An unaffiliated voter can vote in either primary that he or she chooses. So there are advantages to doing that. And I think people see it that way. I think a lot of people are frustrated with partisan politics, so they register unaffiliated. And I see it as an opportunity.
Skylar?
Governor, we know you're governor of North Carolina, but in your region, so Virginia, Tennessee, even South Carolina, some of that, 2008 Obama vibes, feeling, do you see that perhaps happening in Virginia or even in Tennessee? Nashville is experiencing a lot of growth and sort of that similar, growth that North Carolina is seeing. But, in the region, where do you see maybe Harris doing pretty well or not that great in?
Well, I feel really good about Virginia. I don't know much about what's happening in Tennessee and South Carolina. Those are very difficult states. I do know that when you have a candidate like Kamala Harris that's going to generate excitement, that it can help in other races throughout the state that are very important to people. State legislative races, congressional races, local races for various offices. So I think that the excitement that is being generated can help elect people who will do a good job on the local and state level.
North Carolina has some of the earliest voting in the country. I don't know if you guys are the earliest. How do you think about, strategy and getting people out to vote if theoretically they could be casting a ballot in like 3 or 4 weeks?
We say the election starts on October 17th. That's the first day of early voting in North Carolina. And many people like to vote early. It's convenient. You can go in, you can get in and out. So we advocate for people to do that. Yeah, it makes it a little harder because you don't have a concentrated period of time. But it also, we want as many people as possible to vote. It helps us with calling people and checking on people and taking people to the polls and those kinds of things. So I think it's very positive. We've had to fight for that in North Carolina. Our Republican legislature has worked to restrict voting. We've won a number of federal lawsuits to prevent them from restricting voting. They're now trying to take over the elections board in North Carolina, having the legislature be able to appoint the people to the elections board, which the people have already rejected in a constitutional amendment, which the courts have already turned down, but they continue to want to do that, to try to get a hold of the election mechanism, and that concerns me. Yes.
What else are you seeing in terms of the government trying to already delegitimize the election?
Oh, I'm very concerned because he's getting people believe. He still believes that the 2020 election is stolen. We have so many elected officials now who still say that, and clearly we now have J.D. Vance, who would have done the opposite of what a courageous Mike Pence did on January the 6th. That does undermine our elections, which undermines our democracy. And we know it's a lie. It's an absolute lie. And Donald Trump continues to perpetuate it. Many MAGA leaders continue to perpetuate it. It's a very dangerous thing. So we must continue to work to assure people that voting is secure and that it does, in fact, reflect the will of the people.
Elon Musk is trafficked in some kind of attendant conspiracy theories too. Is there any danger for Trump that, you know, a Musk-funded PAC is now leading the charge in terms of getting volunteers to come out? Is there a reputational issue there? How will North Carolinian voters
Whose reputation, Musk or Trump?
Well, both of theirs,
Okay.
you know, but like in terms of just, you know, that effort being cloaked in a Musk effort, how does that land with North Carolina's voters?
I'm more worried about the disinformation that is there on his platform now. There appear to be very few guardrails now. And as we move more and more toward the election with people paying more and more attention to it, it's still August. We're all interested in it, but everyday people are still trying to get their kids to school and get to work and take care of their grandparents, and they aren't thinking that much about this election. But as we get closer to it, there's going to be more and more activity and people trying to get information to them, and I'm worried about the disinformation and the lack of guardrails. I'm not sure what we do about that at this point, other than have people rise up and say, this is wrong, and potentially some type of congressional legislation at some point on this. We don't want to violate the First Amendment. At the same time, peddling misinformation can be very dangerous to our democracy and to that very First Amendment.
Oh, go ahead.
I just think one issue we haven't talked about is immigration. I was wondering what you're hearing from your constituents on that and which candidate is resonating more.
Well, we have Vice President Harris, who actually wants to solve the problem and has tried to solve the problem. In fact, has worked with President Biden and with a bipartisan group in Congress to pass the strongest immigration reform in a generation. We know the candidate who doesn't want to solve the problem at the border is Donald Trump, because he undermined it for his own political purposes, putting himself and his campaign ahead of the American people. And all you have to do is listen to the Republican legislators who worked on this and understand that it was going to be something that made a real difference. The fact that it was submarined by Donald Trump, then President Biden has done the thing that he has to do, is issued executive orders, and that has helped to bring things under control. But I think we need to be compassionate about it. I think she will be so, but she understands the importance of strong borders.
I think Brad has a question over there.
Hi, Governor.
Hey.
Other Democratic governors privately discussed the possibility that President Trump wins the election and Republicans take both houses of Congress. And have you discussed how you might safeguard the rights of your citizens, particularly abortion rights?
Well, we haven't been that pessimistic yet, so we haven't discussed that. But what we have done is we saw during COVID a Donald Trump administration who did very little. Governors had to step up. Actually, governors of both parties stepped up, at least for a while. We had some Republicans then drop off, but stepped up and did the things that we needed to do. And I'm proud that I was chair of the DGA in 2022, where we have Democratic governors in most all of the blue wall states, so that any interference on elections can be thwarted by governors who are there. Obviously, you're concerned on a lot of issues if Trump has a Republican Senate and House. That just cannot happen. I shudder to think what might come down. Reproductive rights, as I said earlier here, I don't know if you were here, but he will sign a national abortion ban. There's no question about it if the Congress would give it to him.
You have talked about, down ballot races in your own state, and I'm curious with the Harris-Walz ticket now, what you think the down ballot races look like for Democrats. The Senate map before was seen as very tough. House sort of more mixed. What is the view among Democratic governors now?
I think it's positive. When Democrats are energized, I think up and down the ticket in a presidential race, you're going to see a lot of positive things happening there. We know that in presidential years, and our governor's races and our statewide races, unlike most states, ours are on presidential years. That's both bad and good. The good thing is that you have more people voting on presidential years, so more people get a choice. The bad thing is it's very hard for down ballot candidates to break through and to be able to let people know who they are. So there's no question that in a presidential year, the partisan wave will affect those down ballot races, and I think it's going to have a positive effect on them, the U.S. Senate races, on House races across the country, and in North Carolina. We don't have a Senate race this time. Long story about technologically diabolical partisan redistricting in North Carolina that I won't go into, but we know it'll help us in our really strong effort to break the Republican supermajority in the state legislature. It's only a one vote difference.
Oh, wow.
And we had the Republican supermajority broken when we had a Democrat switch to the Republican Party and cast the deciding vote to override my veto of the abortion ban, which I think is very frustrating to many North Carolinians and will help us galvanize a lot of people.
We're going to give the last question to Isis, our Chicago bureau chief.
Governor, you talked a little bit about all the investment that came to your state as a result of CHIPS, IRA, and all of the other infrastructure packages from President Biden. What conversations are you having with the CEOs that made this investment there in terms of their concern for the elections, and any specific examples you could give us would be great.
I think they're excited with being able to come to North Carolina, set up their business, create American jobs, and particularly we have seen a significant increase in foreign direct investment in North Carolina. We have the Toyota EV and hybrid battery plant that is the largest, maybe in the world, certainly the largest in the country. They're concerned about the election because the Inflation Reduction Act was part of the catalyst for them coming and setting up shop here. I do think, though, that the Biden-Harris administration has done it the right way in that a lot of these companies are creating jobs in red states and in districts that have Republican members. And if you're going to start wiping away these incentives for clean energy, that's going to cause a problem back in their districts for these jobs that are going to be eliminated. So I think that plan to make sure that these plants are all across the country and that they're creating American jobs everywhere is going to be very important. The CEOs that I talk to frequently are very excited about North Carolina, the fact that we've become a clean energy epicenter, and the IRA, I think, has played an important part of that.
Thank you so much, Governor. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
everyone,
I appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, no, it's been fun. Yeah.
I have a message from the governor of Massachusetts.
Yeah.